My name is Lucas. It was mid-September in 1961, and after a busy week at work, I found myself daydreaming about a vacation. My wife Evelyn and I planned a few days of getaway. Our jobs and social life in New Hampshire had worn us out. Evelyn, an energetic woman working in social services, and I, a dedicated post office worker, were in need of a break. The idea of a vacation, even if just for a few days, seemed like a blessing for both of us. At home, while sipping our evening tea, we began discussing our vacation plans. We decided to visit Niagara Falls and then head to Montreal. Evelyn had mentioned wanting to see the falls several times, hence, this plan was perfect for her. As we packed our suitcases, Daisy trailed behind us. It was as if she realized we were going on a trip and followed us around excitedly. Daisy, our beloved dog, made any vacation truly enjoyable, and we decided to take her with us. Evelyn was her usual energetic and cheerful self while preparing for the vacation. As she packed the suitcases, she entertained me with stories spun from her boundless imagination. This time, her story was about aliens. Evelyn's brother had claimed to have seen a strange light in the sky a few years ago, and Evelyn narrated it as a serious event, talking to me about aliens. Just imagine, Lucas. Maybe we'll see a light like that on the road, huh? She said with a slight smile. I love her sense of imagination. To me, even if there are things in this world we can't explain, I don't believe in such stories. I smiled at her. Aliens encountering us, Evelyn? That only happens in movies, I said jokingly. But Evelyn didn't really believe in such things. She was just expressing her excitement about the trip in a fun way. Even Daisy seemed to be listening to our conversation, tilting her head as if she was trying to understand. We continued our vacation preparations throughout the night. We checked the camping chairs, cameras, and picnic supplies we would put in the car. Evelyn, ever the meticulous one, also packed a pair of binoculars for any unexpected needs during the trip. It was truly hard not to admire her attention to detail. By the time we finished our preparations, we were both quite exhausted but eagerly anticipating our early morning departure. As Evelyn lay down in bed, she turned to me and smiled. Tomorrow is going to be a perfect day. I was just as hopeful as she was. Taking Daisy and leaving this busy city at the break of dawn, finding peace by the waterfalls, would do us both good. But at that moment, neither of us knew what kind of journey awaited us. This vacation would turn out to be much more than a simple getaway. The next morning, we set out early. The air was chilly, but it was clear that it would warm up later in the day. Getting away from the familiar city sights did us both good. Evelyn talked nonstop beside me during the drive. Daisy was moving back and forth in the back seat. Her energetic behavior during trips always brought me joy. Inside the car, we both felt a sense of liberation. We observed the surroundings and chatted along the way. At one point, Evelyn started listing the items we brought for the picnic and suddenly had an expression on her face. How about we take out the snacks, Lucas? She asked with a slight smile. Among our picnic preparations were sandwiches, fruits, and snacks. Isn't it too early? I asked, but she had already started opening the packages. She took out the sandwiches we had prepared at home and handed one to me. How about an early snack? She said, laughing. As we drove on, the scenery began to change, with vast forested areas stretching as far as the eye could see as we got closer to Niagara Falls. Evelyn took out her binoculars and started looking at the birds in the area. When she pointed the binoculars at a random spot, her eyes lit up for a moment. "I think I saw a deer," she said excitedly. I pulled the car over to the side of the road and looked through the binoculars in the direction she was looking. However, it seemed that Evelyn was now focusing on something else, as she continued to scan the distance with the binoculars. Seeing the excitement on her face made everything feel more vibrant to me. I paused for a moment, looked at her, and reached out for the binoculars. As I looked through the binoculars at the movement between the trees, I realized that my eyes were more drawn to the partially opened buttons on Evelyn's shirt than to the nature she was exploring. With a slight smile, I turned my head. It felt as if every moment of the vacation was revealing details I hadn't noticed before. After driving a bit further, we reached a small rest area. We got out of the car and took Daisy for a walk. Evelyn started talking about some of the wild animals she had seen before, and I listened with admiration to her love for nature. I have always appreciated her observant nature. People don't pay attention to details like she does. As we lifted our heads to look at the sky, there was a vast expanse of blue, and the sun was shining through the clouds in the distance. As our journey continued, we got closer and closer to Niagara Falls. The moment we first heard the roar of the falls, Evelyn's eyes sparkled with excitement. We parked the car and began our walk. As we approached the falls, the coolness of the water hit our faces. It felt like we forgot all our exhaustion and everything we had left behind in the city. When we stood directly in front of the falls, Evelyn closed her eyes for a moment and took a deep breath, as if trying to soak in the experience. This moment was more than just a typical vacation for us. The first day of our vacation was coming to an end with the peaceful sight of the waterfall. Evelyn and I took up the sandwiches we had packed and had a small picnic right by the water. There was no one else around, just us, and the sound of Niagara echoing in our ears. At that moment, Evelyn took out her binoculars and looked up at the sky. "I wish I could see the stars this close," she said quietly. Perhaps this wish was a sign of what our vacation would bring. As night approached, we returned to our car and headed towards Montreal. We were both tired, but deep down, I hoped that the rest of the vacation would be just as calm and peaceful. However, there was an unspoken feeling that lingered from that day at the falls. Evelyn's words while looking at the stars would change the night in an unexpected way. The days we spent on vacation quickly passed away. We discovered several nice restaurants in Montreal, took little walks around the city and, as usual, had moments filled with Evelyn's love of nature. When it was time to returning home made us feel a little sad, but the joy of Daisy waiting for us at the end of the trip and the idea of our warm bed also gave us peace of mind. Evelyn was looking for alternative routes with a map on her lap on the way back. To her, returning the same way would close off new discoveries. "Lucas, let's take a mountain road," she said, with that familiar spark of adventure in her eyes. I didn't oppose her suggestion. We had already started our journey with a spirit of adventure, and exploring a different route sounded nice. Around 9 p.m., we had entered the mountain road. The path was narrow and winding, and the forest seemed to be closing in on us from both sides. Evelyn was still enjoying the view from the front seat, but I was starting to feel a bit uneasy inside. The road was deserted, and we hadn't seen another vehicle for the last few hours. Evelyn, however, seemed to take this as an opportunity to enjoy nature. "Look," she said excitedly, "there's no light pollution up there. The stars look brighter than ever before." When I looked up, I saw she was right. The sky was filled with stars, but there was an unexplainable peculiarity about the sight. Evelyn took out her binoculars and started examining the stars. "Lucas, look at this," she said, and I noticed a sparkling light in the sky. At first, I thought it was a star, but we quickly realized it was moving rapidly. The light was zigzagging up and down, left and right, as if searching for something. Evelyn's excitement was growing. "What do you think? Maybe it's a meteor," she asked, but I felt an inexplicable tension inside. Meteors didn't move like that. The light kept getting closer, as if it was hovering over the car. At one point, it came so near that the entire forest was illuminated by a bright light. When Evelyn looked through the binoculars, she held her breath and handed them to me. "Lucas, there's something there," she said, her voice lacking its usual enthusiasm. As I focused on the light, an indescribable fear arose within me. This thing in the sky didn't seem like an ordinary light. It felt like it was observing us. The car shook for a moment, and the engine's sound gradually weakened. Evelyn grabbed my hand tightly and looked at me with wide eyes. "Lucas, something's not right here," she said. At that moment, all the lights went out, the engine stopped, and only the sound of our quickened breaths remained in the silence. Evelyn suddenly sat up straight in her seat and looked out the window. "It's coming this way," she whispered, her voice trembling. It felt as if time had stopped. There was no sound of cars, nor the faintest rustle from the forest. The light in the sky hovered directly above us, illuminating every corner of the forest for a moment. The light suddenly went out, then flashed again. As I held Evelyn tightly in fear, I closed my eyes and wished this was just a dream. Suddenly, the engine restarted, and the light sped away. Evelyn and I stared at each other for a moment. I could see the same fear in both our eyes. Without saying a single word, we continued on our way. Deep down, I wanted to say nothing to make light of the situation, but in that silence, we both knew there was something inexplicable about what we had experienced. We didn't notice any other lights or movements for the rest of the journey. After the incident, we stopped talking. The silence only heightened the tension between us. After a while, Evelyn took my hand and rested her head on my shoulder. This gesture slightly calmed our fear. However, I couldn't stop the thoughts swirling in my head. What we experienced was not a simple natural phenomenon. Evelyn's silent, deep gazes showed that she felt the same fear. Our journey towards Montreal was now a distant memory. We just wanted to go home, return to the familiar, get back to normal life, but the fear we felt that night made us realize that things would never be the same. We drove in silence, trying to get home as quickly as possible. Evelyn still watched the road with fearful eyes, and I was trying to drive as fast as I could. However, I had a strange feeling inside, as if no matter how fast we went, we could never truly escape that thing. Without fully understanding what we had experienced, I found myself breaking the silence by saying to Evelyn, "Everything will be fine." But even my voice didn't sound convincing to me. After a while, the headlights illuminating the road ahead began to flicker again. This time, I felt the fear paralyze my body. At the same moment, Evelyn's breathing quickened. "Lucas, it's coming again," she whispered, as if raising her voice might draw the thing closer to us. I parked the car in a clearing on the right side of the road, turned off the headlights, and shut off the engine. I took a deep breath. My hands were trembling. That night, deep in the forest, sitting in the car, it felt as if we were the only two people left in the world. At that moment, a light appeared in the sky. It was the same mysterious light that moved like before, but this time it was growing larger and brighter. It was coming straight towards us. I could see the fear and helplessness on Evelyn's face. "Lucas, we need to get out of here," she whispered, but the engine wouldn't start. It was as if the car was locked in place by the light hovering above us. The car's interior was flooded with such a bright light that we had to close our eyes. However, this light did more than just blind us, it seemed to take over our bodies and minds as well. Slowly, I felt myself becoming unable to move. I tried to hold Evelyn's hand tightly, but even my hands wouldn't move. Even with my eyes closed, I could feel the effect of that light inside me. It seemed to penetrate my mind, shrouding everything in an inexplicable mist. Suddenly, the light disappeared, and I began to feel my body again. When I opened my eyes, Evelyn was looking at me in astonishment. At that moment, I started questioning whether what we had experienced was real. However, the fearful look on Evelyn's face assured me that everything we had gone through was real. We stared at each other for a while without speaking. The same fear, the same burden of uncertainty, was reflected in both our eyes. I tried to start the engine again, and finally, it roared to life. As we drove off, I felt an unspoken agreement between us that we would never talk about this incident again. Throughout the drive, Evelyn turned her head to look out the window at the sky. I, on the other hand, was trying to drive as fast as I could to get home. By the time we finally reached home, it was around 4 in the morning. Evelyn and I entered the house without saying a word and went straight to the bedroom without even changing our clothes. However, neither of us could sleep. The silence in the room mirrored the silence we had experienced that night. It was as if I could still see the reflection of that light in Evelyn's eyes. We lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, lost in our thoughts. Evelyn whispered, "Lucas, was it really real?" I didn't have an answer to that question. However, the feeling of what we experienced was still vivid in our minds. The next day, we didn't go to work. We sat quietly at home, repeatedly thinking about what we had experienced. Evelyn said, "When we saw that light, it felt like something was watching us," her voice trembling. I hugged her, but no words could ease her fear. As time passed, we began to avoid bringing up the topic. However, every day when I went outside, I couldn't help but look up at the sky. A feeling settled in me, as if that light would reappear at any moment. A week later, Evelyn said, "Lucas, I think we shouldn't tell anyone about what we experienced. No one would believe us. We barely believe it ourselves." I agreed with her. This story would remain a secret we couldn't share with anyone. However, the fear and curiosity inside me persisted. What if that light returned one day? What if those who watched us came back another time? As time passed, we tried to forget what we had experienced like a bad dream. Every night, we would look up at the sky, hoping not to see any lights as we returned home. Despite everything seeming to return to normal, the deep fear and uncertainty from that night would always remain within me. Evelyn and I had made a silent agreement not to tell anyone about what we had experienced, but the terror we felt that night had left an indelible mark on our minds. Perhaps one day, we will muster the courage to take that road again. Perhaps one day, we will see that light again, or perhaps we won't. However, what we experienced that night would remain an unspoken secret between Evelyn and me for the rest of our lives.